He had nothing but a single crumpled dollar and a backpack full of regret. But giving away his last coin triggered a chain of events that changed everything. Forever. Jake Parker sat on a splintered wooden bench outside a dusty gas station just off Highway 12. His jeans were ripped, not from fashion, but from sleeping rough behind dumpsters. The hoodie he wore had a broken zipper and smelled faintly of mildew and fast food grease. It had been 3 weeks since he last saw a warm bed or felt safe. In his pocket sat a single dollar bill, creased, soft, and nearly torn at the corner. He turned it over between his fingers again and again, as if hoping it might somehow multiply. He hadn't eaten in over 24 hours. His stomach growled in protest, but he ignored it. Hunger wasn't new to him anymore. It was just another companion on the road. Just then, from across the parking lot, a man caught his eye. He was older, probably in his 60s, with a gray beard, sun-damaged skin, and a weathered U.S. Marine Corps cap pulled low. He sat on a milk crate holding a cardboard sign that read, "Homeless vet. Hungry. Anything helps. Semper Fi." Jake's gaze locked with the man's for a moment. The veteran didn't beg. He didn't wave the sign. He just sat quietly, holding it with the dignity of someone who had seen the worst of the world and still chose to stay standing. Jake hesitated, then stood. His feet moved before his brain could stop them. He crossed the parking lot and stood in front of the man, heart racing. It wasn't that he was afraid, just unsure. Would this even help? He pulled out that one final dollar, the last physical representation of any value he had left in this world. He held it out. The veteran looked up slowly, his eyes a deep, tired blue. "You sure, son?" he asked, his voice rough but gentle. "Yeah. I've been where you are. Maybe worse." The man took the dollar as if it were made of gold. "God bless you," he whispered. Jake nodded and turned to walk away. His legs trembled, not from emotion, but from lack of food. He didn't regret what he did, not even for a second. He sat back on the bench, letting the sun warm his face. He had no idea what he'd do next, but for some reason, he felt lighter. In the distance, the veteran folded the dollar neatly and slipped it into his pocket. Then he looked across the street at Jake with an expression that could only be described as respect. Jake didn't know it yet, but that moment had just changed his life forever. He thought he'd just helped a stranger, but 3 hours later, a mysterious black SUV pulled up beside him, and what the man inside said would leave him completely speechless. The sun climbed higher, burning through the haze in the sky. Jake remained slouched on the bench, eyes closed, hunger tightening in his belly like a clenched fist. The passing cars didn't notice him. No one ever did. He kept replaying the moment he gave away his dollar. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. In a world where everyone stepped over the broken, he chose to kneel. Time slipped by. A light breeze carried the faint smell of gasoline and old pavement. Jake leaned back and listened to the sound of the highway, each engine sounding like a heartbeat echoing into nowhere. Then, just as the sky turned orange with the setting sun, a sleek black SUV pulled into the gas station lot. It stood out, clean, expensive, tinted windows. It didn't belong there. Jake sat up slightly, squinting. The engine purred quietly for a moment before the door opened. A man stepped out, tall, dressed in a navy blazer and crisp jeans, neatly shaved, strong jawline, and a posture that screamed discipline. He wore a small silver pin on his lapel, the same Marine insignia Jake had seen on the veteran's cap. Jake's brows furrowed.
The man walked toward him with intent, stopping just a few feet away. His eyes searched Jake's face. "Are you the one who gave $1 to the man sitting over there earlier?" he asked, voice steady. Jake blinked. Yeah, why?" He didn't answer immediately. He pulled a photo from his wallet and held it out. It was the same older man. Same beard, same eyes. "That's my father," he said quietly. "He's been missing for months. Last I heard, he was living on the streets after the VA paperwork got tangled and his pension got frozen." Jake didn't know what to say. I didn't know. I just thought he looked hungry." The man smiled faintly. "Everyone else walked by. You didn't." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. It was thick, sealed. He handed it to Jake. Jake stared at it, confused. "What is this?" "A thank you," he replied. "Not just for me, from him." Jake opened the flap slowly, fingers trembling. Inside was a check. $10,000. His breath caught in his throat. "I can't take this," Jake stammered, heart pounding. The man nodded all rightly. "Yes, you can. You reminded my father that dignity still exists, and you reminded me that humanity hasn't completely disappeared." He turned to leave but stopped after a few steps. "One more thing," he added, glancing over his shoulder. "My dad said he wants to talk to you again. Said he saw something in you, something worth believing in." The SUV pulled away moments later, tires crunching softly over the gravel. Jake remained frozen on the bench, the envelope still in his hands. For the first time in a long time, his eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from something far more overwhelming. Hope.
With a check in his hand and tears in his eyes, Jake faced a new crossroad. But what he chose to do next proved that hope isn't just a gift, it's a calling. Jake didn't sleep that night. He spent the hours under a dim street lamp, sitting cross-legged on a bench, envelope still clutched in his hands. The check felt heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. $10,000. It was more than money. It was validation. A reminder that even a man who had nothing could still matter. He could buy a car, rent a room, eat for a month, maybe even disappear, start a new life in some quiet town where no one knew his name. But something inside him fought that idea. Because for the first time in years, someone had looked at him and seen more than a failure. The next morning, Jake returned to the same gas station. The veteran was gone, but the memory stayed like a photograph pressed into his mind. Later that week, he tracked the man down through the son who had given him the check. His name was Raymond Carter, a former Marine sergeant who had served 3 tours in Iraq. The system had failed him, and like so many veterans, he'd fallen through the cracks. They sat across from each other at a small diner. Jake clean-shaven now, wearing a thrift store shirt and new jeans. Raymond's eyes sparkled with something Jake hadn't expected. "Do you know why I took that $1 from you?" Raymond asked softly, sipping black coffee. Jake shook his head. "Because I could tell it was your last, and still, you gave it." Jake swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "You reminded me who I used to be," Raymond continued, "before war, before paperwork, before life wore me down." They talked for hours about combat, about homelessness, about regret, and healing. Jake told him that after all he'd been through, losing his job, his apartment, even his dignity, that moment with Raymond had reminded him who he used to be too. That's when Jake said it out loud, the idea that had quietly grown in his chest like a rising sun. "I want to open a place, a diner, not just for me, but for people like you, veterans, survivors, people no one sees anymore." Raymond leaned back and smiled, proud. "Then let me help you build it." The next month was a whirlwind. Jake used the money wisely. He found a small, run-down diner space just outside town and spent weeks renovating it with Raymond and a few other veterans they met along the way. They called it Semper Pi, a nod to the Marine motto Semper Fi and a tribute to shared struggle and second chances. Every Friday, meals were free for veterans. Every day, the coffee pot stayed hot and the doors stayed open. Jake didn't just find purpose. He created a place where broken hearts could come and be whole again. But the biggest surprise of all was still waiting for him.
Just when Jake thought the story had come full circle, one final guest walked through the doors of his diner, and what he carried would change everything Jake thought he knew about fate. Semper Pi had only been open for a few weeks, but already it was becoming more than a diner. It was a sanctuary. Veterans who hadn't spoken to anyone in years were now sharing stories over pie and coffee. A retired Navy medic played piano on Saturdays. Strangers helped strangers. No one asked why you were broken, only how they could help you heal. Jake stood behind the counter every day, apron tied tight, smile soft but proud. He never forgot what brought him here. He didn't want to. But he never expected who would walk in next. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The sky outside was gray with winter clouds, and the place had only a few guests scattered at booths. The bell above the door chimed. Jake looked up and froze. It was his father. They hadn't spoken in over 5 years, not since Jake had dropped out of college, lost his job, and refused to come home out of shame. His father had tried to reach him, but Jake had disappeared. Now, standing in the doorway, the older man looked thinner, grayer, but his eyes were unmistakable. He stepped forward, cautiously, holding a folded newspaper and something small wrapped in tissue paper. Jake stepped around the counter, heart hammering. "I saw your story in the paper," his father said, voice unsteady. "About the diner, about you." Jake couldn't speak. "I thought I lost you," his father continued. "I was angry for a long time, but I never stopped loving you." Jake swallowed hard, his voice cracking. I thought I didn't deserve to come back." His father placed the small package in Jake's hand. "I saved this," he said softly. "All this time." Jake slowly unwrapped the tissue paper. Inside was the same crumpled dollar bill he had once given to Raymond, the last piece of his old life. It had been folded, laminated, and preserved like a sacred relic. His father continued, "Mr. Carter gave it to me, said you gave it to him when you had nothing. He said that dollar saved his life." Tears welled in Jake's eyes. That moment, one small act, a decision made in total darkness, had echoed across so many lives. They embraced, tightly, silently, in the middle of the diner. That night, the diner stayed open late. More people came. Some heard the story, others just felt something special in the air. Jake framed that dollar and hung it above the register. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Proof that one small kindness can change everything."